River Crowfoot.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker, and it is an honor to once again enter into debate on such an important subject. You know, I think that the first thing that I'd like to address is the comments that the Minister of Justice and other members of the government have been making about how somehow Conservatives are holding up this bill, that we're somehow responsible for this delay. Well, there's really one word, and I'll of course expand upon that, but really one word that completely rejects that argument. And Madam Speaker, that word is prorogation. The government came forward with this legislation before, and then wouldn't it certainly won't surprise any of my constituents, but when the government used their excuse for the need for a legislative reset, that just happened to coincide with the day regarding what very well could have been very revealing documents related to scandals that the Prime Minister and various members of this government were facing in an unprecedented scandal, they prorogued Parliament, resetting the legislative agenda. They reset it. Because of COVID, they claim. Yet now we see many of the bills that they had introduced in the previous Parliament being reintroduced in this Parliament, and then they make it about, well, Conservatives are somehow holding up the process. Now, I believe it's 24 days behind the legislative process. Madam Speaker, 24 days behind the legislative process that we could have dealt with this legislation and many of the other important things, COVID-related and otherwise. Yet, here we are. I think that it is absolutely, well, the words that come to mind aren't necessarily parliamentary, but it is a shame that we find ourselves in this position and that the members from the government side would suggest somehow that we're not doing our jobs by debating legislation that is literally about life and death. Madam Speaker, constituents will hold those members to account on this subject, because certainly I've heard often from those who are concerned on all sides of this issue. You know, and I'll get to some of the comments that the Minister of Justice has made more recently, but on all sides of this issue, there is the need for dialogue, discussion, and careful consideration, so that we can strike the right balance. That's why this Parliament exists, the hollowed chamber that we all have the honor and privilege of sitting in, so that we can have a discussion. Now, certainly, I would love to see the composition of this House changed a little bit in terms of the numbers of seats that particular parties have, and I'm certainly doing my best to ensure that that happens. And I think there's some encouraging news in that front. But it's interesting that that the people that Canadians send to this place, regardless of what the composition is the importance of the dialogue associated with every aspect of our jobs here, whether that be COVID-related, whether that be related to medical assistance in dying, as we're debating today, or the many, many other issues that come before this chamber and its committees. So, Madam Speaker, we cannot diminish the requirement for us to do our due diligence in every aspect of the word, and certainly I am doing my part in this debate, and resoundingly reject the government when they say somehow we're delaying this. Well, Madam Speaker, the blame for that lies directly on the desk of the members of the Liberal government who are abusing, manufacturing urgency, when really the reason there is even urgency to begin with is carefully crafted political games by members of the government opposite. Now, Madam Speaker, I find it very interesting, because as I've listened to the Minister of Justice talk about Bill C-7 over the course of the last specifically number of weeks, there's been an evolution in his response. Now when I stood up, although the last time I participated in debate, it was from my constituency office, so I wasn't actually standing up at the time. But the last time I participated in debate, the Minister of Justice the day before had talked about how they had found the consensus on this issue, that they'd found this broad consensus, that they'd come together and done what the people had asked them to do. And he bragged about the 300,000 submissions to the consultations, when I know for a fact, and I mentioned this in my last speech, that the position the government came to was certainly different than many of the consults that my constituents sent in. Didn't seem to be acknowledged in that regard. But I find it very interesting, Madam Speaker, because when the minister answered yesterday, there was a change in his tone. The Minister of Justice referred to this as a sensitive subject, much more nuanced in his approach, that there's wide disagreement on, but the Conservatives should hurry it up. Now, I'm paraphrasing, Madam Speaker, but I think that the change in the minister's tone is a clear example that I think the Liberals' hands have been slapped. When they claim to have consensus on an issue when it is clear that they do not. When we have disability rights advocates. When we have medical professionals. When there certainly seems to be a wide consensus. Now, it's not universal. I won't go that far, because I think that's an inappropriate use of a term with such broad application. But there seems to be a tremendous amount of consensus, again, not universal, how this bill is flawed and deserves due consideration. So, Madam Speaker, I think that is exactly what this institution's role is. Whether it be us debating C-7 or the other place, when I imagine it will pass. I know certainly at second reading and report stage we saw that it passed, so I anticipate that we'll see a similar result. Then the other place will also have that opportunity to go through that dialogue. So, Madam Speaker, I do, and I am carefully, I set a timer this time, so there's about 3 minutes left. So thank you, Madam Speaker. I do want to talk about how we face a tragic irony, I would suggest. The Government of Canada, like governments around the world, like provincial governments, like municipal governments, have poured trillions of dollars into COVID response programs. Now, it is without question that those who are most at risk for this virus that has gripped our world over the last number of months, coming up on close to a year, the most vulnerable among us are seniors. I find it tragically ironic that in the legislative reset prioritizing COVID, supposedly, we would be debating this bill where it puts some of our most vulnerable at risk. Madam Speaker, while governments have poured trillions of dollars, and in many cases, rightfully so, into COVID relief and response programs, here we are debating a bill that allows people to end their lives, reduce safeguards on a decision that I would suggest can be no more final than that. Madam Speaker, that tragic irony brings us to today. How the government will talk about the need, and with great criticism often they talk about how they criticize Conservatives' debate on many aspects of the COVID response. Yet here they are pushing something that is the antithesis of what we are, I think all parliamentarians would certainly say, when trying to do what's best for our constituents, doing what's best for Canadians. You know, and in my final minute here, I would simply say this. You know, I think that often the constitutionality of this place is forgotten. The reality that the highest elected office in this land is not that of the Prime Minister, but that of the Member of Parliament. And I think, Madam Speaker, often, and we could have, I'm sure, a lengthy discussion about why there's that misunderstanding, whether it be because of the prominence of American media in Canada or education, whatever the case is. But the primacy of Parliament in Canadian law, Canadian society, and the Member of Parliament being the pinnacle of what this institution is. 338 of us. And I find it, you know, when constituents talk about things like Western alienation, they say, how can you make a difference? And my response is, well, you know how I know I can make a difference is because I occupy the same number of seats as the Prime Minister does, as the member from Winnipeg North does, as any of my Conservative colleagues, Bloc, NDP, Green, etc. You know, I think that that's the strength of our institution and why free votes are a part of the reality of this place. And I would certainly encourage my colleague.
And I will let the member pursue and the Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Leader of the Government.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And as I've indicated, I do believe that it is a false argument from the Conservative opposition to try to give an impression that this is about process. It's not about process. It's more about the lack of confidence. And I guess I would ask the member, because the Conservatives as official opposition are saying, well, we don't trust the Quebec Superior Court. They're impugning the character and competency of, in fact, the Quebec Superior Court judge, I would suggest to you. They say that no to the legislation, it should have been appealed. So my question to the member is, will he come clean and be transparent with Canadians and just say, we don't like the legislation, and if we were in government, we would not respect that Superior Court. We would, in fact, go to the Supreme Court of Canada.
The Honourable Member for Battle River Crowfoot.
So thank you very much, Madam Speaker, and I appreciate the question posed by the member opposite, and I would respond in two ways. One, I would encourage the member, if he hasn't had a chance, to read our Constitution and understand the appeals process, lower courts, higher courts, and the Supreme Court, because that certainly, it has nothing to do with the confidence of the decision. It has to do with decisions that were made within what I assume is the hallways or the back rooms of how this government operates. So, to the member opposite, through you, I would encourage I would encourage the member to look into that process, because I'm sure he would find it enlightening. And then when it comes to open and transparent, well, I think that there's certainly a lot that I would say on that. But where are the documents regarding the We Charity scandal? Where are the documents regarding every aspect?
The Honourable Member for Winnipeg Centre.
Madam Speaker, and you know, I think we can all agree that the disability community has a history of human rights violations in this country. I know that it's been mentioned by my Conservative colleagues many times today. My question is, because of that, do they support call-outs from the disability community for a guaranteed livable basic income and more great investment in affordable, accessible social housing, and more support to ensure that people have what they need to ensure they can live in dignity? Yes or no?
The Honourable Member for Battle River Crowfoot.
Well, Madam Speaker, when it comes to ensuring that Canadians have the opportunity to live with dignity, absolutely yes. However, when the member talks about you know, the need for supports and ensuring that there are programs to protect the most vulnerable among us, you know, I would simply pose a counter question, quite frankly, to say, okay, well, how's that paid for? Well, it's paid for by the prosperity of Canadians, including, you know, natural resources. And I certainly have heard from Indigenous communities that are troubled by the fact that there are political opponents in this place that would...
J'ai un point d'ordre, oui, l'honorable député de Laurentides-Labelle. L'interprétation ne semble pas...
The Honourable Member for Laurentides-Labelle.
To see, is it working now? Oui, ça fonctionne. Sorry, the Honourable Member.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. And do I get a few more seconds in the time? So thank you very much. No, and I would encourage the member, when it comes to ensuring that Canadians have the opportunity to live lives with dignity and ensure that we can have well-funded social programs and whatnot, we need to ensure that our economy grows so that there's the revenue for government to be able to pay for the world-class suite, and of which deserve continuous consideration and ways to ensure that they continue to serve the best interests of Canadians. I would ask that member to consider supporting some of these resource projects that are largely supported by Indigenous communities from certainly her region and others.
Questions and comments. Questions et commentaires. The Honourable Member for Regina Leeuwen.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker, and what a privilege it was to listen to the member from Battle River Crowfoot today. I had the honor of working with this young man when he was in the Saskatchewan legislature, and to hear him represent his constituent views today on such an important bill is just inspiring and shows just the great parliamentarian this young man is going to be for a long time. But my question would be, could he expound on some of the reasonable amendments that our Conservative Party made to this bill, and really, if he could, maybe give an example or two of why he thinks this Liberal government would have voted against some reasonable amendments that put safeguards in place, like the 10-day reflection period, that really was championed by most people with disabilities across this country.
For Battle River Crowfoot.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. And it's a little bit hard to believe there was only a few years ago that I was a staffer serving this member when he was an MLA and others. And it is certainly an honor to be able to serve in this hallowed institution now with him as colleagues, and certainly look forward to working with him for many years to come. And I said, hopefully there will be a redistribution of seats within, reconfiguration, and look forward to hopefully that being from the other side. He mentioned the two very important amendments that were brought forward that ensure, the real crux of what we're talking about here, to ensure that the most vulnerable among us are protected. And two very simple aspects of that would be the reflection period and would be the reasonably foreseeable death and the time limit there. Because, Madam Speaker, to protect those most vulnerable among us should be of the utmost importance for each and every member of this House. So I would encourage, in my final few words, that all members would vote the way that they feel best represents their constituents, not the way their party leaders suggest they should.
Reprise du débat. L'honorable député